The most terrifying thing a human being can do is accept themselves completely. And if you want to understand true character, your own and other people's, there are two psychological windows that almost never lie. Most people think they're excellent judges of character. They look for confidence, success, charisma, kindness. They judge based on what someone shows them, what someone says, what someone appears to be. But Carl Jung understood something far more unsettling. Most of what you see is performance. He called it the persona, the mask every human being learns to wear in order to survive socially. The real person, the authentic character, lives beneath that mask. And while someone can control their mask for hours, days, even years, these two signatures always slip through the cracks. What makes these patterns so reliable is that they operate outside conscious control. You can choose your words. You can manage your facial expressions. You can craft your tone, polish your stories, rehearse your reactions. But these two reveals come from a deeper place, what Jung called the unconscious. And the unconscious doesn't lie. It can't lie. It simply exposes what you've buried, what you've rejected, what you've disowned in yourself, and what you're still trying to control with effort and image. Jung's first revelation about character is brutally accurate. You can discover someone's true nature by observing who they judge most harshly. Pay attention to the intensity here, because this is where most people's self-awareness collapses. When someone criticizes another person with unusual force, with that sharp edge in their voice, with a sudden tightness in their jaw, with a strange urgency to condemn, they're rarely making an objective observation. They're projecting. They're unconsciously seeing their own rejected qualities in someone else, their own buried desires, their own forbidden impulses. Jung called this shadow projection, and it's happening constantly in conversations, in comments, in gossip, in moral outrage, in casual judgments that feel obvious. The traits you hate most in others are very often the traits you have buried most deeply in yourself. The stronger the emotional charge, the closer you're getting to your own shadow material. Those aspects of yourself you pushed away so thoroughly that you can't recognize them as yours anymore. Here's how this works in real life. Picture a man who is successful and respected, someone who prides himself on integrity. In every meeting, he complains about a colleague he describes as manipulative and fake. His voice sharpens, his body tenses, and he can't stop talking about how this person charms clients, gets praised too easily, and succeeds through performance rather than substance. On the surface, it sounds like a moral critique, but Jung would see something else immediately. That intense reaction isn't really about the colleague. It's about something buried inside the critic. Deep in his unconscious, this man wishes he could be more socially fluid, more charming, more comfortable in relationships. But he has rejected that desire because he convinced himself that social skill equals fakeness, that charm equals manipulation. So he buries that part of himself so deeply that when he sees it in someone else, he experiences it as a threat, something disgusting, something dangerous, something that must be attacked. His judgment becomes a form of self-rejection acted out on someone else's stage. This is why projection reveals character so perfectly. When someone judges harshly, they are always telling you something about their own inner conflict. The qualities they attack most viciously are often the ones they pushed into the unconscious most violently. And if you've ever caught yourself making a harsh judgment and then felt that uncomfortable flash of recognition, like the judgment said more about you than about them, you've experienced this directly. But Jung discovered something even more interesting. Projection isn't only negative. People also project positive qualities they're afraid to claim in themselves. When someone consistently puts others on pedestals, calling them so talented, so confident, so creative, so magnetic, they may be projecting abilities or potentials they carry but refuse to acknowledge. They admire it obsessively because it feels like it belongs to someone else, not them. The key is still emotional intensity. When someone's reaction is disproportionate, whether explosively negative or excessively positive, you're watching their shadow at work. It reveals not only what they reject, but what they secretly long to express. Think about the phrase, "every harsh judgment is a confession," Because it is. Every intense criticism is an autobiography. Every emotional reaction to someone else's behavior is a map of your own internal landscape. Most people go through life never realizing that when they point fingers at others, they're often drawing portraits of themselves. Jung believed we cannot change anything until we accept it. And many harsh judgments are acts of inner oppression, rejections of parts of ourselves that could actually serve us, that could make us more whole. The person who attacks others for being too emotional often has buried their own emotions. The person who criticizes others for being selfish may not have learned healthy self-advocacy. The person who humiliates weakness has often rejected their own vulnerability so thoroughly that they see it only as disgust when it appears in others. Now, Jung's second reveal is even more immediate and visceral. You can see someone's authentic character by observing how they behave when their carefully constructed image is threatened. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are. But most people spend enormous energy maintaining who they think they should be. That maintenance requires vigilance, control, and constant self-monitoring. And when the persona is challenged, when the mask slips, when the image cracks, when status or competence is questioned, authentic character emerges in the moment of vulnerability. Here is exactly how to spot it. Watch what happens when someone faces unexpected criticism. Watch how they react when their competence is questioned, when they're caught in a mistake, when their carefully managed image cracks even slightly. Do they become instantly defensive? Do they attack back? Do they deflect blame onto others? Do they smear the person who challenged them? Or do they pause, breathe, and respond from genuine maturity? That split-second reaction, the one that comes before they regain control, is the real signature. Imagine a woman who is a marketing director known for calm professionalism. She built her entire career on being unshakable, the person who never loses composure. Her persona looks bulletproof, practiced so well, it seems like her natural state. Then in a high-stakes client meeting, the client criticizes her team's strategy, questions her judgment, implies she made poor decisions, and suddenly the mask cracks. Her voice turns sharp. Her posture becomes rigid. She interrupts the client mid-sentence. She shifts blame onto team members. She throws subtle digs about the client's past decisions. The calm professional disappears, revealing someone defensive, insecure, willing to sacrifice others to protect her image. That moment reveals more about her character than years of controlled interaction ever could. Under pressure, when the persona was threatened, the authentic pattern emerged unfiltered. Persona breakdowns are so revealing because they bypass rehearsed responses. They bypass image management. They bypass the version of a person they want you to see. They show the raw psychological pattern underneath. And here's what makes this especially powerful. These breakdowns don't only happen in big crises. They happen constantly in small moments. Someone's phone dies and they can't check social media. Someone is kept waiting longer than expected. Someone doesn't laugh at their joke. Someone questions their expertise casually. Watch for micro changes, a tone shift, a tight smile, a sudden coldness, a sharp comment disguised as humor. Those tiny moments when the mask slips for half a second often reveal more than hours of prepared performance. Authentic character is not what someone chooses to show you when they're prepared and in control. It's what emerges when they're unprepared, unguarded, and caught off balance by circumstances they didn't anticipate. Jung believed the most integrated people, those he called individuated, show remarkable consistency between their public persona and their private reactions. Their image and their reality align because they've done the deep work of accepting themselves. They don't need elaborate masks because they aren't hiding from fundamental aspects of their own nature. When criticized, they can consider feedback without their identity collapsing. When challenged, they can respond thoughtfully because their self-worth isn't dependent on looking perfect. But most people aren't individuated. Most people are maintaining personas that require enormous energy. When those personas are threatened, the energy becomes unsustainable. The mask cracks, and in that crack, you see what's been hidden. Jung understood the architecture of the psyche, how the mind organizes itself to navigate reality while protecting the ego. He wrote that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances, and if there is any reaction, both are transformed. But transformation requires clarity. You need to understand what each person is made of beneath performance. Shadow projection reveals character because the unconscious can't cleanly separate self and other when it comes to rejected material. When you criticize someone for being fake, your unconscious may be trying to process your own relationship with authenticity and performance. The unconscious often casts inner conflict onto outer people so it becomes visible, so it can be worked with, so it can be brought into awareness and integrated. The intensity of judgment tends to match the intensity of the internal struggle around that trait. This is why genuinely secure people rarely judge others harshly in the same area. Someone who is truly confident doesn't waste energy mocking insecurity. Someone who is authentically successful doesn't feel threatened by ambition in others. Someone who has integrated their complexity doesn't need to attack complexity in other people. And there's a quiet loneliness inside constant judgment. Jung wrote that loneliness doesn't come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to yourself. When someone is always judging, they're often disconnected from rejected parts of themselves. Every harsh judgment can be a cry from the shadow, begging to be acknowledged, begging to be integrated. Now let's deepen the second reveal. Persona breakdown works because maintaining a false image takes psychological fuel. Jung understood that ego maintenance becomes fragile under stress. When the persona is threatened, primitive defense mechanisms activate automatically, and those defenses reveal core patterns with brutal accuracy. Do they attack, showing underlying aggression? Do they withdraw, showing avoidance? Do they deflect and make excuses, revealing a relationship with dishonesty? Or do they face feedback and integrate it, demonstrating maturity? Jung wrote that a person who hasn't passed through the inferno of their passions has never overcome them. The way someone handles criticism shows whether they have integrated difficult emotions or are still controlled by them.